Forests cover almost one-third of the planet. They're not only home to life, but they give life. Without them, we wouldn't have the air we breathe or the climates we enjoy. And they're a place that many of us are drawn to in a deep and unexplainable way. But more and more frequently, we live in fabricated cities that take us further away from nature. This shift towards modern living brings with it new health challenges, both physical and mental. So, what happens when we return to a natural state? Can we heal and restore our bodies and our minds?
I remember that the neon lights of Tokyo were overwhelming. They wrapped around me like a blanket of color as I spun in the center of Shibuya Crossing. There were swarms of people engulfing me as I stood in the busiest intersection in the entire world. I felt dazed as I adjusted to the scene, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in the world. Everything seemed a millisecond off. It was like watching a subtitle film where lips don't move in sync with sounds. It was uneasy, but I was also curious at the same time. Screens with animated characters flashed and followed by fast-paced commercials which zoomed and popped in a way that only Japanese ads can. There was a dizzying number of signs on the building facades, and they were each lit up and curated to lure consumers into their camera store or sushi bar or nightclub. I felt the intensity that was Tokyo, an organized pulse of bigger and brighter that would make Times Square jealous in its mastery of the senses. But I wondered if I was up for the challenge, as a month of flying and filming sipped at my already drained battery. I was exhausted, and I felt like this might actually be too much for me at this point. Nothing could have prepared me for entering the largest city in the entire world. Its futuristic synchronicity was something to marvel at. From an organized customs experience entering the country to a seamless cab ride to one of the many city centers, the metropolis felt utopian. Now, I grew up in Toronto, and I worked my first real job in New York City, so I was no stranger to big cities. But Tokyo really surprised me. Observing the clean streets with steady traffic and bustling public transport and courteous commuters, my preconceived notions of a megacity were really challenged. My North American urban concepts clouded my perspective. It was kind of like an outline of a light bulb that stays burned into your vision after gazing at the filament too long. But as I stared at Tokyo's digital horizon, a new vision came into focus. I saw a strange dichotomy between the familiar and the foreign. You see, Tokyo is enamored with the West, but it's steadfast in its commitment to its culture. For instance, there's these omnipresent 7-Eleven stores that look recognizable from the outside. However, inside, they break all conventions. So instead of stale ham and cheese sandwiches, I found shrimp wrapped delicacies, octopus jerky, and rows of seaweed rice rolls with sour cherry centers. Also, cream-filled pastries showcased Japan's trait of elevating almost everything, even a mere convenience store. Now, this was after 4 weeks of long-haul travel and filming, and my health and optimism were nearly worn out. We'd seen landmark after landmark, done interview after interview, and I was mentally drained. And with the finish line in sight, my body began to slow down and conserve itself. What I craved was quiet and rest, but I was simultaneously amazed by the spectacle. Japan was my 8th country in 33 days, and after 34,000 kilometers of travel and 7 red-eye flights, my capacity to process was at a bare minimum. My adjustment to the city came with intention, but I reminded myself that I might not ever have this opportunity again, so I wanted to make the most of it. I remember thinking back to my junior high cross-country school coach who told me in races that said that it takes more energy to start and stop than to keep on going. So I remember taking a deep breath and I soaked in my environment. And I found myself having to ration my focus as the scene competed for my attention. I was excited to explore the city, but the gray buildings and the crowds seemed like a daunting task to tackle. I had met Toshi, who was a local filmmaker through his production company in Japan. We had arrived in Tokyo earlier that day, and I'd let him know we were ready to start filming for the day. After replying to his text, I headed to the hotel lobby where he had just arrived. But as I introduced myself to him, he had this lack of initial excitement, and it hinted at a rather unenthusiastic day ahead of us. But when our small crew of James and Braden appeared with their cameras in tow, Toshi's attitude completely transformed. See, he had braced himself for a day plagued with sluggishness of a large crew. Instead, he found himself in an energetic handheld shooting spree, and he was ignited by the youth of our team members. And we were off. We started by looking at some of the standard landmarks, but the tourism route quickly changed as he relaxed into his role. He took us through this local alley of indoor markets that spanned over 200 meters of tiny restaurants and eateries. We walked through the buzz of people that were eating. There were chefs searing dishes, and the steam rised from behind every single counter. The wood interior contrasted against bold Japanese ink signage, and red drapes divided the countless diners. And for the first time, I truly sensed the tradition of Japan. We emerged from this gastronomic tunnel and we entered the legendary neighborhood of Harajuku, famed for its eccentric fashion. Harajuku was an amalgamation of contemporary urban trends and traditional Japanese aesthetics. There was bright Hello Kitty backpacks adorning storefronts, there were school uniform kids scampering about, and local artists showcasing their craft. Toshi signaled us for him to follow it to an art studio, a tiny second-floor space. Inside, there was shiny plastic, furry leggings, and cat ears dotting the fashion shelves. There was 2 Harajuku girls working the counter, and they graciously posed for my photo, flashing peace signs with their heads tilted to the side, their bright outfits perfectly in sync. And as I left the electrifying maze of the Harajuku, there was a stark contrast that awaited me. There was this calm embrace of what's called Meijinju's garden that sprawled out before my eyes. To get there, we had to travel through a massive crowds in order to get to the gardens. But when we got there, going from the stress and the pace of the busy Harajuku was like stepping into a different era. It was worlds away from the relentless beat of Tokyo. It was as if the universe was sensing my need for peace, was guiding me from the clamor of the modern to the hush whisper to the ancient, from the urban jungle to the pocket of natural tranquility. The gardens became my sanctuary. I walked beneath the canopy of towering trees, and their branches whispered reassurance that refueled me. There was a sound that resonated that was comfortable and reminiscent of the giant poplar trees outside of my childhood window. Their rustling was a familiar reminder and brought me back to the moment. The weight of the city's intensity began to lift off me, and it was replaced by a peaceful rhythm that resonated with every step I took on the gravel path. As I ventured deeper, there was these massive torii gates that loomed ahead of me, and their presence marked the entrance to a different transition. They were crafted from cypress wood, and they towered high above, and they were iconic Shinto gateways that signaled my entrance into a realm where reverence and serenity reigned. It was a place like this that had drawn me to Tokyo. It wasn't the fast-paced urban setting that I sought to learn about, but it was the quiet of nature. You see, Japan had given rise to a philosophy called Shin Rin Yoku, or forest bathing. The next day, I was going to meet Dr. Kagawa, a researcher from Japan, and he was going to show me a setting even more dramatic than this. I was there to learn about how he had managed to validate and measure the positive physiological responses to spending time in the natural world. Now, his research had shown that in the forest, our bodies are actually at peace. Our blood pressure will drop, our minds forget their distractions, and we're saturated with these natural chemicals. They're called phytoncides. They are called alpha-pinene and limonene, and there's several others, and they improve our immune function. But more than this, the air is clean in a well-preserved natural environment, and there's space to move, and there's this beneficial disorder to it that commands our attention from ruminating thoughts. I felt it at that moment in Meijinju's garden. I remember breaking free of my fatigue for a moment as clarity washed all over me. As we walked around the shrine's grounds, there was more wonders that were revealed. I came across these walls of decorative sake barrels. Now, these barrels were art in themselves. They were wrapped in straw and covered with intricate designs. They represented offerings of rice wine to the enshrined deities in the temple. But in the heart of the shrine, there was a special scene that unfolded. There was a traditional wedding procession gracefully weaving its way through the courtyard. The attendees were dressed in elegant, simple garments, and the bride was beautiful and serene, and was shielded from the sun and the umbrella, and cast a warm glow over the groom. The buzz of the crowd stopped, and the hush fell in unison. There was a surreal feeling that washed over me as I immersed myself in the moment. The backdrop of Tokyo now seemed far, far away. Visiting Meijinju was a salve for my mind. Even a city that seemed constantly moving, this sacred space provided me with a short but tranquil oasis for reflection. It was a needed reprieve from the travel and the stimulus, and gave me some clarity and a more positive perspective. Again, I found myself drifting to the past. It reminded me of my backyard and the solitude of the forest that surrounds my home on the coast of Newfoundland. The forest is a constant comfort in my everyday life. And I think that this absence provided me the opportunity for stress to take hold little by little during my travels. Flight after flight, there was this feeling and this pressure, even positive pressure, that was accumulating, and it didn't have my normal relief from nature that I take for granted each day. We had traveled from steaming Delhi and crowded airports through Bangladesh and Thailand, and all the time there had been this relentless tug at my mind for calm. And I found myself anticipating the next day's exploration of the forest of Okutama, the home of the therapy trails designed by Dr. Kagawa himself. Now I stared at the trees as they swayed in the breeze, and I noticed their shadows were casting long lines on the path in front of me, and it reminded me of our final task for the day, to watch nature's final performance and witness the sun dive behind this Tokyo skyline. So we made our way back to Shibuya Crossing, having pinpointed the ideal spot in a tower for an unobstructed view of the horizon, and the sun gracefully descended between the towering skyscrapers while giant video screens flashed and their movies and advertisements were displayed. Swarms of people moved across in orchestrated chaos, crossing the iconic X-shaped intersection as twilight deepened. The streetlights awakened, and the lights flicked on in the tall buildings, and began the city's evening act. I was mesmerized as I watched the sun's final moments. It's an image that seared in my impression of Tokyo into my conscious and changed what I thought of the big, bustling city. Now, with the days filming behind us, Toshi revealed one more trick. We had navigated the busy streets until we reached this unassuming little building. We climbed 4 flights of stairs and arrived at the entrance of a quaint glass-fronted restaurant. But beyond the little entryway, the space opened up to reveal this huge sushi restaurant. Now, Toshi took the reins ordering, and we toasted our chilled beers, and I savored every bite of my mackerel sashimi and miso soup he ordered me. But then I remembered something. I searched through my phone, and I navigated my favorites folder, and I opened up bucketlist.doc, and I read down the list until I found what I was looking for. And it said, eat sushi in Tokyo. And the cursor blinked, and I hit X next to it, and I pocketed my phone, and I smiled. It was a perfect little moment. I realized that it was the infusion of nature that had brought me across the finish line that day. From an attitude of this reluctant participation to one that achieved a goal in life, I credited the change in my perspective with reconnecting with nature. And we should all remember that in life, there's tools around us that we can employ that listen and support us and help our bodies and minds. And nature might be one of the most powerful modalities we could ever use. However, whatever I thought I knew about nature was about to be redefined the next day when I met Dr. Kagawa. Now, the journey from Tokyo's buzzing Shinjuku station to Okutama deconstructed the built environment before my eyes. With each passing minute, the imposing skyscrapers dwindled, they were replaced by low houses, then stretches of open land, and finally a horizon touched with green. The transformation from urban concrete to leafy nature was a visual metaphor for the change of pace my mind needed. Even the crowds changed before my eyes. Business suits in modern fashion gave way to Gore-Tex backpacks and hiking boots. The mass of people, like the towering buildings, were left behind. Things spread out and gave me room to breathe. And before long, I had space, and I had seats to myself, and I had quiet. And I was seeking what the other people in the train already knew, and that was that the forests of Okutama are a remedy for the intensity of big city life and the urgency of our urban modern lifestyles. After arriving in Okutama, I was greeted by a local forest therapy guide. Now, she would introduce me to the science and the art of Shin Rin Yoku, or forest bathing. And this just wasn't a nature walk. This was therapy, a mindful immersion into the senses of nature. Now, this practice has been adopted around the world, but it actually began in this exact forest in Japan. My guide's name was Akemi, and she was calm and kind, and she was clearly committed and well studied for our adventure. She presented herself with this sense of lively peacefulness, if that makes sense, and we began with an offering at a Shinto temple at the top of the trail. Now, Shinto faith of Japan is deeply intertwined with nature. They believe that forests, mountains, and rivers are considered sacred and inhabited by spirits. Making an offering is a way of showing respect and reverence for these gods before visiting their home. And as I dropped my coins into the offering plate, they fell between the wooden dividers with a hollow rattle. It wasn't just a coin I released. I felt my stress begin to leave my body, and my awareness returned to this mindful moment. We bowed and we made our way back down the staircase from the shrine. It led to a small river that wound its way through the steep hills and lush trees. The rocky shoreline was made of countless eroded river rocks, and here I had my first encounter with nature's patience, this seemingly timeless exercise to perfectly roll the rocks into their well-balanced form. And this is where Akemi tested my blood pressure and heart rate. Now, the impact of the forest was measurable, and establishing a baseline before its treatment helps validate the Shin Rin Yoku approach. It also helped reinforce behavior. Even in the absence of my guide, I knew my heart rate and blood pressure were higher than normal. And she confirmed this, actually. And I hope the program would work for me as it does for its patients. Now, a barefoot river walk was the opening order of therapy. The cold water numbed my tired feet, and the lapping current nudged me into the setting. I gingerly stepped through the stream as the hard stones massaged my feet and the water gurgled around me. I smelled the clean beer bottle colored water, and it brought me back to my childhood in our cabin in the Miramichi River, New Brunswick. There we'd spend all summer in that river, and I caught myself reflexively looking for tadpoles and minnows through the reflective sheen of the water. And at this moment, I was a child again, and I realized the constant nature's played in some of my fondest memories. These reflections felt so real. It was as though they could be brushed away. They had been dormant and forgotten, and now floated to the surface like bubbles from the cold water of that brook. Pick a rock, Akemi instructed to me as if she was reading my mind. I came from a family of geologists, and it had always been a tradition to take a stony souvenir from memorable stops. I found one that was round and clean, and it reminded me of the worry stone my father used to carry. I was unexpectedly bombarded with emotions and realized it had been way too long since I had ventured into that corner of my memories. So if this was the first task, I wonder what laid in store for the whole hike. Rock in hand, I waded from the water to the shore where Akemi was methodically stacking stones to see how high, and she asked me to see how high I could make one. She instructed my competitive spirit, and I was ignited. I began to audit the beach for the flattest, most balanced rocks and stacked them slowly, one on top of each other. The miniature tower teetered now with each stone, concentrating on the shape, size, and the weight of each pebble, and it focused my mind as I found the clutter and fatigue drifting away. I was playing with rocks on the shoreline like a kid, and it put me at peace. My nervous system powered down, and I was quietly immersed in the activity, and I was invested in the process. I tried one more rock and knowingly smiled as the tower toppled. Like Icarus, I felt my eagerness go higher, but with a much more positive reward. Looking up, Akemi acknowledged my effort. She encouraged me to check in with my body and could feel my heart beating slower and slower and my breathing deep and controlled. Okutama is a forest of towering evergreens. The park arborists have removed their branches for the entire length of the trees, creating a canvas of linear trunks that challenge the mind in a visual puzzle. It's one of nature's cathedrals. Here I felt small, but still a part of something vast and intricate. I wandered along the trails and watched the treetops sway in the wind. The path switched back and forth up the mountainside as the giant cedars reached upward. Finally, I emerged near the top of the trail, where Akemi motioned me to come and see a beautiful flowering bush. Use your insect eyes, she instructed me as I took the colorful blossoms and delicate petals. Bright pink and perfect, they were miracles of nature. Now use your eagle eyes, she said as she motioned me to look up. I looked at the horizon and my vision focused on the sky. The trail had been expertly planned. It was cut away to reveal a panoramic view of the valley. Tall mountains decorated the distance as hills and treetops added their dark emerald color to the picture. The contrast was moving, and the impact of this central trickery made me smile. They got me again, I thought, as I stared at the scene. I noticed a small trail of smoke rising from the woods, which signaled our next stop in the valley. There was a small wooden structure overhanging a ravine, glowing a soft, warm hue. It looked cozy and inviting in the cool spring air. I approached the rest station and peered through the window as I opened the door. Walking in, I was greeted by Dr. Kagawa, the founder of forest therapy. His entrance was timed perfectly to coincide with my admiration of his life's work following a first-hand immersion on the trail. He carried himself with a profound calmness. He spoke softly and intentionally. He didn't waste words or overexpress. And with a humble confidence, he appreciated his own insights and imparted knowledge, smiling after conveying words of wisdom. He possessed a comprehensive knowing that could only be achieved when there was no debate on the subject. It was irrefutably obvious that he was right. He was calm and serene, like the trees that swayed gently in the mountain breeze. He blended with his environment and was instantly comfortable in his presence. I saw steam rising from the teapot and smelled fresh gingerbread cookies on the table where the large glass panoramic windows were looking over the gorge. Their view was breathtaking and chosen for obvious reasons. A small wood fireplace burned in the corner, and the orange and yellow flames flicked at the stove window and reminded me of my shed back home. Akemi and I removed our shoes, and we donned slippers, which was a familiar Japanese ritual. She took me to a small room to the right of the main area with a glass window. The room was like a miniature auditorium with padded benches staggered on different levels before the window. She asked me to lie down and close my eyes. I was warm and comfortable, and I lay on the bench as she hit a chime. In the last 30 days, think of one thing you're grateful for, she said. Today, think of something you saw that was beautiful. The depth of the questions changed to greater introspection as she continued. What could you have done better this week? She continued. And what are you most proud of? She quizzed me with a series of questions reflecting on what I did right and what I might have missed in my day-to-day unconscious routine of the week. Forest bathing is an inclusive therapy, and it helps patients connect with the natural world, but it also addresses their physical and mental health challenges. These formal therapeutic moments seamlessly blended into the environment and tapped into the awareness triggered by the forest experience. I could see how this could help speed up the counseling process by priming the patient to be present, aware, and disconnected from their day-to-day life. The trail was made accessible to everybody and complete with a train-type track with mobility challenged individuals, and the trail was not as much about physical exercise as it was about mental fitness. Following the meditation, we sipped on hibiscus tea by the fire, accompanied by warm cookies. The herbal tea and tart gingerbread stirred my previously neglected sense of taste. The fire crackled and popped as I recanted about my curated section of wood, which was birch and spruce from back home. I had a hobbyist obsession with making the driest firewood possible and dry out all summer long. Keeps us warm when the North Atlantic chill kicks in all winter long. So it reminded me of that as well. I found myself constantly being reminded of things back home. I was warm and content, and I felt the cabin, and I left the cabin going to our final therapy station. It emerged into a clearing, and we saw metal benches artistically shaped to lie down on and watch the clouds drift by. They had this curious design that elevated my legs and committed me fully to the relaxing meditation. Staring at the clouds drifting by, I realized that I was also surrounded by fragrant bushes. Now, my mind drifted and quizzed itself, and I wondered how many of these obscurities had I missed on my countless hikes in the East Coast Trail of Newfoundland. Often, with our busy lives, we're in nature, but we're not with nature. We see, but we don't observe. We hear, but we don't listen. My eyes were now open, my ears were tuned, my taste and smell were alive, and we walked towards the exit of the trail. We walked side by side in the quiet solitude of the forest, and Dr. Kagawa walked quietly behind me and Akemi. His presence was calm and relaxed. He observed silently, embodying the calm and focus that forest therapy promotes. His slow, intentional words interspersed with pauses, allowing the forest sounds to create dimension between his thoughts, and added a new layer to our experience. Dr. Kagawa continued to elaborate on one of the most fascinating discoveries he had found. He's shown that Shin Rin Yoku has the ability to reduce our stress hormones. And these are hormones which cloud our mind, increase our anxiety, and make our heart race. Being in the forest pauses the stimulus to release these hormones, which is caused by our thoughts of meetings and calls and deadlines. Dr. Kagawa has shown that a dose of nature sometimes has a greater impact on improving our health than many of the medications that we take in day-to-day lives and are dispensed without hesitation. Now, this is common practice, but why? Well, it's because somehow humans now find it easier to take synthetic drugs than to immerse ourselves into our natural world. And this is why Dr. Kagawa calls it forest bathing. He believes it should be done daily as a ritual that cleanses our bodies and minds from the artificial world that we lather ourselves in. We were sauntering down the path, and I was in no hurry at this point. I found myself running my hand along tree bark as I passed and listened to the wind in the leaves. I smelled the wet dampness of the moss that lined the trail and saw water drops trickle down rocky ledges. I'd be able to revisit this memory in my mind, and I added it to my collection of special moments waiting to be triggered the next time I was in nature. And as the forest walk concluded, the most tangible health benefits of the forest therapy became evident in my own body. In this serene environment, combined with the mindful practices embodied in our journey, had changed this level within my body, my physiological response. My blood pressure had dropped. This change had manifested this deep sense of calm and lightness within me. My breathing was now softer and more rhythmic and mirrored the gentle pace of the forest itself. And my heart rate, as it slowed, it also aligned with the peaceful, unhurried rhythm of nature. Mentally, there was this newfound quietude in my mind. It's often cluttered and full of a constant buzz of thoughts, but now it was clearer and more focused. And this mental stillness allowed me for a richer, more reflective sense of the world around me. I was acutely aware of the natural sounds, the intricate patterns of the leaves, and the play of the light through the forest canopy. This heightened sensory awareness, coupled with the physiological changes, encapsulated the essence of forest therapy. It wasn't just a walk in the woods. It was a transformative experience that rejuvenated the body, calmed the mind, and enriched the soul, leaving me with a profound sense of well-being and connection to the natural world. So let's learn how we can all take a forest bath here at home. First thing you got to do is you got to begin with mindfulness. Start your forest therapy with a quiet moment to center your thoughts. Commit to leaving your worries behind and opening your senses to the experience. Be sure to explore the visual tapestry. Look for patterns in the way vines climb or how shadows play on the forest floor. Spot the contrast between the rugged bark and the delicate ferns. Discover nature's bouquet. Seek out new scents by gently brushing your hand against leaves and flowers, releasing their unique fragrance. Indulge in textures. Take off your shoes and feel the very textures of the earth beneath your feet, from soft moss to solid rocks. Absorb the quietude. Close your eyes and identify subtle sounds you might otherwise miss, in the distant trickle of a stream, for example. And also savor natural flavors. Pack a small stack like nuts or apple slices to enjoy a simple, clean taste that complements natural surroundings. If you're in Newfoundland and you feel safe with it, then pick some blueberries. That also helps. Okutama is more than just a day away from Tokyo's hustle for me. It was a reminder to pause, to feel, and to be. Even when surrounded by skyscrapers, neon lights, and televisions and cell phones, we can all find our little forest to bathe in. Forest therapy is a blend of purposeful silence and mindful observation, and it peels back layers of sensory overload that often shroud our perception, and it reveals the vibrant sense of life that thrives beneath. Okutama's trails have imprinted profound truths on people, and that is the antidote to our modern ailments don't lie in the complex fabrication of human design, but in the simple, elemental connection we share with the natural world. So, whether it's a quiet corner of a park or a potted plant in your home office, create your own ritual. I suggest having herbal tea and gingerbread cookies. Thank you.
And a huge thank you to you, Dr. Wahl, for that informative and fascinating presentation. Before we begin the Q&A, I want to take a couple of moments to thank both of our sponsors for today. Johnson Insurance is now Bel Air Direct, and they continue to offer specially designed policies and preferred rates on home, auto, and travel insurance for Memorial University alumni. We're grateful for Bel Air Direct's ongoing support of our students through work terms, graduate hires, scholarships, and more. And we encourage you to reach out to them to learn more about Bel Air Direct group rates. Manulife now provides alumni with the option for new or supplemental life, health, and dental insurance. You can explore this recently added program on the MUN alumni website. And now, are you ready for the Q&A?
Sure, yeah. Let's see what we got.
So I'm going to remain off camera and I will direct the questions to Dr. Wahl. You'll still hear my voice, but here the focus is on Dr. Wahl.
Okay.
And we've got some questions. You ready?
Yep, hit me.
Listening to your description of the relaxing experience you had while walking was truly soothing. For those who might not have the opportunity to venture outdoors, such as individuals in hospitals, do you believe that an audio meditation resembling your walk, complete with the same prompts, could evoke a similar effect?
Well, that's a great question, and it's actually true. So that was one of the things that we talked to Kagawa about was what does it require? And the reality is, when I was on that trail, I was able to use all of my senses, but using some of your senses is fantastic. So those screens with the soothing, actually we're in Norway recently and they have what's called slow TV. And what they do is they watch a sunset, they watch caribou migrating. They do these things that take a long time where you're immersed in nature. So if you can watch something even on TV, fantastic. The soothing sounds are fantastic. Having a nice cup of tea, staring out a window when it's raining like it is here today, and tasting the tea and being cognizant of that, those are all little ways you can break this up. And so obviously going to the extent of the forest that founded forest therapy was incredible and super immersive, and I'm glad that came across in my description. But really, we can break all those little chunks down. And so it's about using your senses for more than just vision. It's about sensing the taste, the feel, the hearing, the smell, all those things. So I would you can break them up and you'll get all the benefit as well. Just sometimes it's better to do it all at one time. But again, whatever you can get, we should get. We're definitely lacking it in today's world.
Question number 2. Are there specific techniques for adjustments people should make when forest bathing in RDF, rain, drizzle, or winter weather?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to Norway again on this one because Norway is very similar to us in a long way. It's very, very cold. And they always say there's no such thing as bad weather, there's bad clothing. And of course, having the right gear is expensive, and that can be a limiting factor for a lot of people. It's challenging to have the dedicated gear for this, but if you can stay warm and you can stay dry, RDF is perfect. And RDF is really beautiful, actually, as well. When I got home 4 days ago, the thing I couldn't wait to have was the smell of the ocean when I came out of the airport and seeing the cold and, seeing the fog in the morning coming up the cliffs behind where we live in Logie Bay. That's all part of the charm we have here. And so it is beautiful. And we do have some incredible trails that are, world renowned for that. So I would say yes, it's the clothing in RDF, and it's the idea that it's not a bad thing. It's just the way things are, and we should capitalize it if we can. And of course, in Newfoundland, we know that when we do get that one sunny day, the trails are full, people are outside and happy, but it doesn't mean we can't do it when it's not nice.
Okay. Now the third question, can you speak to grounding and how this might also relate to forest bathing?
Yeah, so grounding is a little bit outside of my scope, but I'm kind of aware of it. I've talked to several experts about this over time, and it depends on what your belief is. And one of the ways I at least understand grounding is that it helps you with energy. And so another example of our recent travels, we were in Bolivia at the Uyuni salt flats, and these are famous. And we actually went to this hotel where they covered me in salt because salt is supposed to remove bad energy from our body. No matter what culture you look at, there's tons of cultures that show that you can go barefoot in the forest, on the moss, in the water, on the salt flats, whatever, and that helps connect you with the natural world. And I do believe that. Whether you can measure the change in our body from that, I'm not sure, but I do think that if you were to measure something as simple as blood pressure and heart rate, walking on soft moss or soft grass in Bannerman Park, that's going to calm our body down. So grounding, I think, has some benefits. Some people believe it has very profound impacts in the body. I haven't been able to find specifics on that because that's not my area, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it. That's for sure. I think it's great. Take your shoes off, get on a natural surface, and ground yourself. And I think there's some health benefits to that.
Do you have a favorite place yourself to go forest bathing?
Yes, actually, there's a beautiful place right in Logie Bay, down by the castle, where we go to, and my wife and I will go down there with dinner, and we'll have a little fire, and we can look out and sometimes see icebergs, and particularly this time of year coming up, we can see whales breaching, and you can feel the sea breeze. It's perfect, and that is a perfect place where you can smell and feel and see and everything all at once, and we bring our meal so we taste at the same time. And I think that's the thing that I always missed from the forest bathing experience was I didn't think you could incorporate all the senses. Typically, you would feel the exercise and you would be trying to get from point A to point B. But that forest therapy trail was only 1.5 kilometers long, and it could have been shorter. So for the use of therapy, it wasn't about physical activity at all. It wasn't like a challenging hike. It was very simple saunter through the woods, very easy trails. But it was every time we turned around the corner, it was almost like being in a theme park where you move into a different part of the theme park where the scene looks differently. It's open and you can see the horizon, or there's narrow trees, or there's a quiet stream with a bridge. And it was really, really interesting how intentional they were around that. So, any place that's going to draw your attention away from the thoughts in your head is a great place for forest bathing.
Do you think, or is there evidence that people can see long-term changes to heart rate or blood pressure if they do this often?
That's what Dr. Kagawa has shown. He's published well over 100 articles, and he shows that especially when it's coupled with mental health counseling. So, for example, when she was asking me the questions, imagine somebody going through it with an intention, trying to get over trauma, deal with anxiety, some sort of challenge that they're facing, and being able to customize those questions in the middle of it to really get to you while you're very open to the question. It's really hard to sometimes be truly honest with yourself, especially when it comes to counseling, when you've got a million other things going on in your head. But what they do is they masterfully peel all that away so that you're very present when you actually do this. So you're honest with yourself and you're able to get more out of the therapy. So what they recommend is they do it regularly. They prescribe it. It's part of their medical system. They actually prescribe these forest therapy walks. They do it regularly, and it may be something like CBT, which is a certain amount of treatments before they get to their outcome, or it could be a regular occurrence. But essentially, there is a marked transformation in you when you finish this trail, because you aren't just going through having a chat. You have to be intentional. You stop at an area, you have to appreciate everything that's happening. There's not a lot of banter back and forth. You're very intentional. So yes, there is a profound change over time with people. And more than that, you're able to take that feeling that is triggered by being in the forest with you when you're in that busy subway or you're in that skyscraper at your office or whatever that may be. That's the key, is that it's making you aware when you're not in that state, and it becomes so blatantly obvious that you can sort of bring yourself back into it a little easier in the modern world.
This might be a little bit off topic, but we have a question about sleeping outside, whether it's a nap or do you think that could provide some of the same benefits?
I camp all the time. I love camping. Camping is one of my favorite things. I grew up camping. I camp all the time. Sometimes people find camping and sleeping outside for camping very difficult because there's this natural tendency in our body where we're in an environment that's not familiar to stay awake because there could be a sense of danger to it. So some people have a really hard time camping in nature. Other times, if we camp, in Newfoundland where there's the ocean, it can be loud and things like that. Like people don't realize how loud waves are and things like that. But in general, if you are camping outside, I think that there can be a real peace that comes with it. I remember, waking up in the middle of the night and you go to stoke the fire that's outside or grab a snack and you look at all those stars and you realize how much light pollution we have in whatever city we're in. And it really adds that sense of calm. So personally, I find I have fantastic sleeps out in nature. I camp all year round in the middle of winter and in the summertime. So I find it good. If you're new to it and you find you don't have a good sleep, maybe give it a few more tries and you'll start to be more comfortable. That's natural for people not to sleep well at first, but over time, yes, definitely.
Now that you've traveled to so many places, if you had to pick a handful of places to return to where you could apply these same practices, what are some of the places you might?
That's a good question. I mean,
outside of the East Coast Trail.
I was just going to say, Newfoundland is my first place because it's so familiar and so good, and I am viciously happy to be in Newfoundland and Labrador. I mean, Bhutan was stunning. Bhutan was the only carbon neutral country in the world. It has more trees per area than anywhere else. So that was obviously a place where nature can really reign supreme. We just got back from Norway. Norway was stunning. One day, and this will be in the next season of the show, we cross-country skied with backcountry skis up a mountain above the tree line into this fjord where we were on top of a big mountain of powder, and we skied down through all the way to the tree line and then down all the way down to the water right next to the coast. And that was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And you couldn't be, if you couldn't be present in that, it's impossible to be present anywhere. I remember we stopped this little mailbox on top of a smaller peak as we were making our way down, and our guide, his name was Henrik. He was Special Forces in the Norwegian Army, but he was an outdoor guide. And he pulled open this book, and it was a logbook of who visited the place, but he pretended it was something else. He said, "Oh, this is a love story. This is a letter to your partner at home saying she knows that you found another love, and that's the love of the mountains. And how could you not fall in love with this? And of course, your partner understands, but she wants you back, and she wants to come with you to visit the mountains." And I thought it was a beautiful way of putting it because the appreciation was so good. So those are a couple. And then the last place that we just saw that's so fresh in my mind is we were in the Uni Salt Flats, which are 10,000 square kilometers of the largest salt pan in the world. You can see it from space. And we watched the sun dive down under the horizon. And as the stars came out and the moon rose, the moon illuminated the white surface below us. And you could see the Milky Way in the sky. And there was unlimited star soup above us. And again, that was another moment that I'll never forget when it comes to nature. But again, I've had similar things up in the Avalon Peninsula, camping out overnight where I could see the Milky Way as well. So, wherever you are, as long as you're in the right state of mind, I'm sure you can appreciate it.
That actually relates to our next question, because during your talk, you spoke about having a potted palm in your office.
Yeah.
But the suggestions for those people who are living in, for example, like the prairie, someplace where there are no forests necessarily.
Yeah, and you have beautiful nature there though, too, right? Like beautiful fields and ability to be outside and open spaces and a blue sky that's blue quite often. It's about creating an appreciation for the natural world, right? And you can look at a beautiful city too. Cities can be beautiful. Looking over Tokyo, which is the biggest city in the world and modern, it had its beauty in its own way, right? So it's just about I guess just tuning in and looking for the beauty. I think sometimes, and again, this is getting a little bit philosophical here, but you know, when I travel, that's one of the reasons I do this, is to be able to look at my perspective and see if I'm on track or not. And that is that we tend to look for things that are negative sometimes, and as opposed to looking for the positive. And there's beauty in everything, even in the busiest, craziest city we've ever been to. There was a beauty to the chaos within that. And so I think that, yeah, it's just about tuning ourselves in. Again, it makes it really easy when we're surrounded by a beautiful natural setting. That's the cue. But after that, you can start to apply that in every aspect. Even terrible situations can sometimes have a silver lining because you learn something from them.
Do you have any suggestions for people who would like to do forest bathing, but they're working offshore on a
Yeah,
ship?
I worked offshore for years. I spent over a year of my life on rigs, 420 days to be exact. And you remember every day you work on a ship or on a rig. I've been on Atlantic towing supply vessels and some of the can ship tankers and all the oil rigs offshore and all around the world. And it's tough. However, there was countless times that I went for a walk around the deck overlooking the ocean. You can see the sunset from everywhere when you're in a rig, because all you got to do is go to one side of the ship, go to the west side of the ship, and you can watch the sunset. So I've had some beautiful nights out there, some of the most peaceful nights you could ever imagine, out in the middle of the ocean where it's calm and quiet and you can see the stars and things like that. So you can have it there. Just get your dose of something different when you're home, because that view can be really monotonous. In particular, the offshore Newfoundland, I'm not going to glamorize it. We all know this. Sometimes it's raining from the brim of your hard hat because there's so much moisture out there and the fog is so thick and you know the chopper's not coming. There's a million reasons to hate what's going on in the environment at that moment. But when you do get a chance to break free of it, that's great. And then on those days when it was ultra cold and ultra horrible outside, that's when I would go to the gym, because they all have good gyms and they all got good food. So at least you got good company to keep you occupied.
I think our viewer who's on the offshore, she said she likes to think of the clouds coming down and giving her a hug.
Yes.
Which is certainly a case of
You're getting
the silver lining in the gray.
lots of hugs on the offshore. That's for sure.
I don't know if we have any more questions. I think you've answered everybody's. I think we're good.
That's great.
So,
Yeah.
and we're wrapping up. Our
Yeah.
time is concluding. It has flown by this hour. Thank you so much to Dr. Wahl for generously sharing his time and expertise. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Just that if people want to check out the show and they want to see this episode in particular, we did a full episode on this topic. You can go to NTV Plus and you can get the app, and all these shows are available for streaming there. And that we just wrapped our filming for another season where we went around the world and looked at different ecosystems. That'll be coming out in the fall. And then finally, all these stories and all these talks we've given come out of the book that we've just written on the same topic, so people can pick up that as well. Again, thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions, you can email Alumni and I'll be happy to answer them at your convenience.
Great. We're going to be taking a break over the summer, but everyone watching can mark their calendars for episode 5, which is coming on Wednesday, September the 11th. And registration, as always, will open 2 weeks before that time. This session has been recorded and the link will be shared in an upcoming email. So keep an eye on your inbox, and we hope you all have a fantastic day and get out there and do some forest bathing. So goodbye for now.